All right, welcome everybody to another session. My name is Eduardo Chiocconi. I'm part of the Oracle product management team. And today I'm accompanied with Gary Holmar, who's also coming from Oracle. I'm pretty much the mastermind behind this new service we're offering within the Oracle Process Cloud service. So as we are placing the DMN service into our product offering, it's bundled with the Oracle Process Cloud service. And it's one of the many services that we offer around creating process applications. Obviously, we have forms on that. But the approach that we follow with this DMN service is to create a new microservice independent from the lifecycle of the process lifecycle itself. So that's giving us a lot of independence in terms of providing ways of evolving rules separate from the process. We are offering this through a browser base. 100%. We leverage extensively the field and expression language to create logic in different elements within the model. One of the things we focus very specifically is to allow the consumption of these rules not only from a process perspective, but from any other client application. And every time you deploy a DMN model, then we offer a REST interface to be called from any place. One of the things we try to follow as well is the top-down decomposition. So as you start modeling your rules and decisions within the model, we just want you to start defining the main building blocks and then provide an implementation chaining things together. As you start creating the different elements in your decision model, we offer different choices. And obviously, we have decision tables, which is the most popular one. But then we have other things like functions, context, if-then-else statements. In model itself, we have a set of input parameters and then a bunch of output parameters, which are going to be the operations of the REST service we're going to be generating at runtime. So you can have multiple options for rules creation. Before publishing, you can test and validate your rules. We have a very quick tester application. You can create tests and cases and validate that your models are working as expected. And I'm going to be showing that in the demo. Again, when we deploy, we offer a complete stateless service offered through this new microservice within the PCS offering. And this is very lightweight and very, very performant from an execution and a perspective. Something very strong and important for us was to provide a very powerful lifecycle with the ability to patch rules, generate new versions. And then the second thing that we've been getting a lot of feedback from is how you can easily consume these models from within a process. And this is one area that we're going to be demoing today. So from the process layer, be able to browse deployed decision models and very easily connect them with the process. Again, when you are doing the lifecycle of decisions, you can create new versions, you can patch. So all that is part of the standard offering. And I'm going to be showing that. Another important aspect for which we decided to have a separate decoupled lifecycle for the DMN service and process is that typically the processes tend to be more static from a change perspective than rules. Rules change more frequently. So that's why we wanted to provide a separate lifecycle for this new component. The demo example I'm going to be showing today is an expense approval process. We're going to be mapping some compliance rules for the expense, and then try to provide a more streamlined approval. DMN service was brought in with a very agile and iterative lifecycle in mind. So you're going to be creating things, but we expect these rules to be changing over time. Okay, these are not static things. So a lot of emphasis is being put there. We also strongly believe that the standardization on DMN and the field language is helping with the consumption of these type of solutions by business stakeholders. And obviously, that's going to be creating a common ground for this community to feel comfortable creating these rules and decisions. Obviously, it's not proprietary lock-in, and then you can start morphing and exporting this into other tools. Again, as I mentioned before, we're going to start with a very simple process. We're going to be adding a decision, and then we're going to be hooking it up to a decision model that we're going to be creating on the screen. So after this, we jump into another demo. So what you're seeing in front of you is process cloud service. In this place, or in this tool, we have the notion of spaces. So this is a collaboration area where you can create process applications and DMN models independently one from the other. Again, I'm emphasizing the independence and life cycle of each. And then you can define permissions of who can access the assets that you're placing within these spaces. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is going through the expense compliance validator. So I'm going to be getting into this DMN project. And I have already pre-staffed some of the components, so I don't have to create everything from scratch. So this is an expense. It's going to have a header and then a bunch of line items. The elements that we are concerned about when checking the compliance of an expense report are pretty much the code, okay, and the amount. Okay, so we're going to be creating rules and policies that are going to be checking for a specific code, a particular threshold amount that we want to validate. And if things are below that threshold amount, then we're not going to be involving any human individual. Again, this is a simplistic scenario just to illustrate the concepts, but then things can be more complex in nature. So one of the complexities with expense reports is that you're going to be getting a list of elements, but then you need to start checking the compliance for each one of the elements in this list of expense items. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a two-step decomposition for validating this particular policy. One is going to be my expense report validator. In this case, it's going to be my top-down expression, okay, that will break down the elements in the list, and then it's going to be delegating the validation compliance to another rule that will be checking the elements. So I'm going to be checking the expression. And before I go and implement this, I'm going to be adding a second rule that is going to be the specific line item validation. In this case, I'm going to be implementing this as a function because we want to invoke it and then get the result back that then I'm going to be aggregating on the first component. So as we go bottoms up, I'm going to be creating input parameters for this expression. So I can easily do that. I'm going to be focusing on the code of the expense line item. This is a string value. I'm going to be adding an amount, which is going to be a numeric value. And then the function can be implemented easily using the field expression language, and you can start doing any type of calculation. But then in my case, I've got a lot of codes that I need to analyze, right? So it's much more convenient to implement this function using a decision table. Okay? And what I'll do is I'm going to be basing the result of this line item validation based on the code, and then a field expression that will be checking the particular code amount. So I'm going to be using this intelligence component as we are crafting and authoring these decisions. And then I'm going to be adding things like for the lunch expense line item, I'm going to be defining a policy where I'm going to be allowing $20 as a threshold for automatically approving this type of expense item. I can add more items as needed, for example, dinner. And then I'm going to be giving a greater amount, let's say $50. Okay? And we start saving this. Then we can add more elements. We can say that anything that is not considered in these two codes, then we're going to be returning a false value. Okay? So this will allow me over time to add more codes to automate the expense approval. Now, you're going to start seeing some things that the DMN editor is automatically validating as we author our new rules. Like, for example, there's some overlap between rules 1 and 2, 1 and 3, and 2 and 3. And this can be easily resolved by changing the heat policy, okay, which we are implementing. So we have different heat policies. So in this case, I'm going to be going in an incremental order. So if I change this to first come or first heat policy, then I'm going to be resolving that ambiguity and then make this function very predictable. All right, so we created the baseline for the expense line item validation, right? I can keep expanding this. This should be pretty easy to extend by non-technical users, and that's kind of the target persona we want for DMN. But now I need to start looping through each one of these line items and then delegating for this function to resolve each one of these elements. I cheated here. This is a particular field expression that we're going to be adding. So let's copy it, or let's see if we can add it here. But basically, you can also create this with the IntelliSense fashion. It's going to say, for every item in my report items collection, I want to satisfy the execution of this function, which is the one that I just implemented. And I'm passing two parameters, which are the two elements of that expense line item. Okay? So here you can see how you start composing more complicated decision models with by breaking down and offering a top-down decomposition. So once we have this baseline for an expense validation, okay, I think I call this differently, expense item validation, validator. Now you can see that it's on green. Let me increase the size of this. Then everything should be validating correctly. Okay. So now I've got a baseline for my expense validation compliance service. So now I want to start testing it before I publish and deploy it. And then I can run my debugger, okay, or tester, so to speak. I'm going to be removing some elements. But by the rules we define, lunch below 20 and dinner below 45, then this should be validating to true. So it should be a compliant expense report. And this is the output we're getting, right? But on the other hand, if I decide to, for one of these, go above the thresholds, let's say 55, then we're going to see the output of running these validation is going to be different, okay? So once we are comfortable that this decision is ready to go, then we can publish and deploy it so that it can be consumed by any REST consuming application or even the process that I'm going to be showing you in the Process Cloud service. So we do manage the notion of snapshots, okay, that then you can deploy. So this will help us track the evolution of your decision model, and then you can provide descriptions that the consumer can see as to which is the appropriate version of the service that they need to consume. Okay. So you already have this model already pre-built. So I'll show you that very quickly. It's my version 0, and it shouldn't differ much from what you've seen, but it's again a way of exemplifying that I'm going to be consuming input parameters, which is my report. So I simply drag and drop as my input. So if I have individual elements there, I can drag only a subset of this. And then I want to specify which is my decision within this model that I want to use as my entry point for executing this service. Okay, so I could drag and drop any. And you can have multiple services or operations on this decision model if you want to. Okay. So let's go to my process and try to consume this. This V0 is already deployed. So I'll go to my expense approval. And in this case, we're going to see that when I open my process, it doesn't have any decision service, right? It's a straight through. It's always going through a manual approval, okay? But in order to reduce bottlenecks and speed up the processing, I'd like to just come in and add a decision, all right? So PCS is currently leveraging the bpmN standard for modeling processes. We're adding other modeling capabilities down the line. But the way to connect DMN with process very easily is to drag and drop this decision activity. I'm going to be calling this validate expense compliance. Okay. The next thing I need to do is, once I place it in the right area in the flow of the process, is to define the implementation and binding to this service. All right. Sorry for this being at the bottom of the screen. So if I already had registered some decision services or models within PCS, I would see them in a dropdown. But this plus is offering a very easy navigation into the fully integrated DMN repository. Okay? So in this case, I already have only one version. Actually, it's my patch version 6. Okay? But I could see other services because from time to time regulation changes, and you still need to consume the older version of the model or the newer version of the model. So it's really up to the consumer to select which one they want to use. But again, all this is browser-based. It offers a very easy discover mechanism, and you don't need to be looking somewhere else as to, okay, where is the endpoint URL that I need to use to consume this service. So I'm going to be taking this. And when I select the use, it's going to the DMN repository, doing some metadata discovery on the structure of this service, and then will automatically populate my decision model dropdown. And then if I had more than one function available in the decision model, then it will be available into the decision service. Did I hit it? There you go. So in this case, it's showing the decision model and then another decision service that I offer as part of this model definition. All right, so I bounded my decision model to my activity. So the next thing is, how do I pass context from my process to the decision model service? All right, and we do that in PCS via the notion of data associations. Data associations is nothing more than, okay, source data variables, target data variables. So I'm going to be inspecting what my decision model is offering. Okay, input parameters, an array of items, so I can simply drag and drop them. And then I need to specify from my process context which element I'm going to be providing for evaluation. Again, items, this seems pretty straightforward. Okay, but there's a problem. There's a data mismatch between the process and the expected types and values in my DMN service. But this can be easily fixed with a particular transformation, right? So I already pre-created this. This is pretty straightforward. It's code to code, amount to amount, but still the type system is identifying them as different. Again, in PCS, we opted explicitly to remove any scripting. So what the process owners or developers will see, it's pretty much this data association mapping tool. Okay, so we're trying to lower the barrier and make it more usable by less technical individuals. If I want to drill down into this transformation, then it's nothing more than an attribute to attribute transformation. If I needed to, like in this case, they're expecting different types, so I could cast this to the appropriate type value. So I'm going to be canceling this, going one level up. And now that I have selected this transformation, then it's validating. All right? So I'm going to hit apply. And I think that's all I need to do to consume this DMN service from a process. It didn't look that complicated, right? So the next thing I need to do is to, okay, obviously I'm going to be saving it. PCS, like the DMN service, also offers like a snapshot-based approach to deployment. So developers can start tracking down different code levels. And then you can say, okay, this is a snapshot that I tested that is ready to be deployed. And what we are going to be doing here is pushing a new snapshot into the common collaborative repository. So I'm going to say that added decision to automate expense approval. All right? It's identifying some of the resources that were modified since the last published. And what this is doing is just pushing all these changes into our built-in collaborative repository. So the next thing, I'm comfortable with this. So I'm going to be hitting deploy. And this is going to be deploying a new version of my process into our runtime engine. What you can see here is that I've been playing last night and a couple of days before, so several versions. So the approach I'm going to be taking is I don't want to create a new version, right? So I want to override the existing expense approval versions and offer this new level of automation and streamline a set of capabilities. So as I only push this as the last change, I'm picking this element from the dropdown. But if I create a snapshot with a particular name, I could be selecting this from the dropdown list. Second thing is, going through this wizard, is to identify other services that may need some specific environment bindings. Typically, this process doesn't have any service invocation, so we can skip this. And actually, I forgot something. So let me go back. In my data association, I define the input parameters, how to get the values from the process into the DMN service, but I forgot to map my result coming from the DMN service saying, hey, do I need to manually approve this or not? So this DMN model service is returning an interpretation. In this case, it's a Boolean. It could be any type. It could be multiple data structures, right? So it's really up to you how you model the process, what's going to be the return value. And again, via data associations, you can map that back into your process context. And then I already have a predefined variable that I'm going to be using in my process gateway to determine if it requires a manual approval or not. So I'm going to be just dragging this element in, and then I'm going to be able to propagate the resolution of the DMN service into my process context. Hit apply. So we're going to be saving again. We're going to be pushing this minor change that I forgot. Thank God for the validator and warnings that are helping me avoid this type of mistakes. Add missing output mapping. So now that it's published, I'm going to proceed to deploy. And then I'm going to go the route of overriding my 3.0 version. Going through this deployment wizard. This is fine. Again, validations now are OK, no warnings. Deployment option, I'm going to be overriding my 3.0 version. Okay, so I'm going to select the override, which is and then I'm going to be hitting the deploy. So now all these process application assets that we've been pushing as snapshots into my repository are now being deployed to my runtime engine. Again, PCS DMN, it's all running on the cloud. Okay, it's running on the Oracle public cloud infrastructure. So the provisioning of all these capabilities taking a couple of hours. Okay, so forget about the old days of the on-premise and having to spend a lot of time in provisioning this. All right, 3.0, new version, patch version. All right. So what I'll do is I'm going to be moving to our process workspace. And I'm going to be coming to my home. Okay? So this interface is mostly used by within the company individuals. We typically don't expose this interface to our target end users, right? But it's a good way of helping us test this particular process. So we're going to see that we can start an application, my submit expense process. And using PCS form capabilities, which again are adaptive response and all that, I already hard-coded some values to avoid a lot of typing. So I'm going to be submitting an expense report for this particular conference, trip to bpmNEXT, bpmNEXT. I'm an employee on this particular region, and I'm going to be adding some out of compliance. So lunch, OK, I spent $15, less than 20. But then I'm going to be coming in and adding a hotel line item. If you remember from the decision model I created, I only had lunch and dinner, no hotel, right? So this submission should go to my manual approval because it's out of compliance. I didn't find any rule and policy for my hotel expenses. So even though I can provide a very low value, like $2, then it should go through the manual approval. Okay, so the instance has been submitted. We're going to come to the task payload, and then I'm going to see that, hey, there's a new approval pending for you, trip to bpmNEXT. I could have extended that to more specifics about me being the submitter. So if I come in, then I can process this. I can override and say, OK, this is OK. Or I can also come to my tracking page, where I can get more insight into where the process, or where this process instance been through the execution, right? So start, it did the DMN service validation. Then it detected that, OK, it needs a manual approval, and it's going through the human step. All right, so let me try something different. Let me come to my composer experience. And I'm going to be adding a new line item for the hotel. And now when I submit that same expense report, things should flow in a streamlined fashion. So I'm going to be coming to my version 0. And in my second decision, and I'm gonna be adding a new line item for a hotel. And let's say I'm gonna be saying that if this person is spending less than $100, then I don't even need to care about this, right? So again, we could be doing a very quick validation. Hotel, let's say 99. True. If I come and change this to 101, then it should say false, right? OK, thumbs up. Let's get rolling. So what I'll do now is I'm going to save this. I'm going to be checking my snapshots, okay, because I want to publish a patch to this particular version. So I probably generated version 6, but overriding my version 1.0. So I'm going to come to deploy. I'm going to call this my version 7. It's like added hotel line item. And I'm going to be overriding my 1.0 version. I'm going to specify that I want to patch it. And I'm going to be deploying this. So what it's doing, it's an on-the-fly service replacement with this new set of rules and policies. So now I'm ready to come to my process. Okay, I'm going to come to my home. I'm going to kick off one of these expense line items again. I'm going to be adding lunch. In this case, it's going to be $15. I'm going to be adding hotel. And I'm going to be specifying $80. Okay. So when I submit this, it's going to go through my process. If I quickly come to my task, then I see the previous one, not the one that I just submitted. If I come to tracking to see where that instance been, I only see the one that is pending. But if I come to complete it, I'm going to see this 114, which has been marked as completed. And now if we look at the particular process trail, we're going to see that it went through the north path, completely automating and streamlining our process. So this is the end of the demo. What I want to summarize again is DMN service. It's a new microservice independent from the process lifecycle. So you can patch, revision these as much as you need. The browser interface and the standardization on DMN is helping for these type of models to be consumed more easily by non-technical individuals. And then you can start delegating the policy authoring to business and stakeholders. More importantly, they're going to be able to do it on their own time frame and then reaching some agility. And what I mentioned before, most of the changes do tend to happen at the policy rules level more than at the process structure level. So again, bringing this level of independence is very powerful for the product offering. All right, so with this, I'll just make a pause and open it for questions.